Last Sunday we looked at chapter 5 of the book of Esther, and almost said Easter again. And it gave us a comparison contrast on how Esther handled the problem and how Haman handled the problem. And I would dare say that when we left, we all felt like we're an Esther. You know, Esther had faith in God. She had people praying and supporting her through prayer, and she was patient in how she handled the problem. And so she was trusting God for her solution. And we saw Haman was filled with self, filled with pride, and with hatred in his heart, that he despised Mordecai. And so I am sure that when we left here, we said, you know, if I'm going to be an Esther or Haman, I've got to be an Esther. I can't be Haman. And so the problem is we all battle with a little bit of Haman inside each and every one of us. Of all the sins which we struggle with, perhaps pride is the worst sin of all, because it's very subtle. You know, a lot of times we think we've got a handle on pride, and then the next thing you know, it's resurfaced. There's a lot of things that just, we want to please self. We know what self desires. And there's a lot of flattery, there's a lot of enticement about looking out for number one and satisfying number one. And so it's really easy for us to get consumed with being prideful, with being self-centered. Pride is a spiritual disease. It really is. Because pride, it attacks us from within, and by the time you see it outwardly, it's really become a problem that is either managing you or you've got to find a way to manage it. And pride will really hinder us in our life. First off, it will keep us from having a good, holy, intimate relationship with God. It will also block us having good relationships with other people, our spouse, our parents, our children. Pride says, look out for me, look for me. It doesn't make you think about other people. And then pride also has the tendency, if you know someone who wants to say Jesus is Lord, but they have a hard time, it's because if you're filled with pride, you don't need a Savior. I've got it all under control. I don't need anymore. And so pride doesn't allow you to admit that you've got a sin problem. So pride, it deceives us, it destroys. And so chapter 6 helps us to see the pride that Haman is dealing with. It also shows us that God continues to work in mysterious ways. And so sometimes in life, even as believers, we feel like we're in this alone. We trudge through life and we try to keep our head up, we try to keep hope in our heart. But sometimes we feel like, where's God? Where's He in the midst of all of this? Well, let me assure you, we should never doubt the faithfulness of God. He is always there, even if He doesn't appear to be. He's still there. And I think chapter 6 helps us to see that. So we're going to look at the first 6 verses of Esther chapter 6. It goes like this. It says, "The night the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai exposed Bigitana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this?" the king asked. "Nothing has been done for him," his attendants answered. And the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, "Haman is standing in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. And when Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Certainly you can see that God works in mysterious ways. First off, the king could not sleep. You know, sometimes when our slumbers disturb, God may be at work. And so we need to be careful to pay attention to the Holy Spirit's nudging. Maybe that's the only time you're still enough to be sensitive to what the Spirit's trying to lay upon your heart. And so the Spirit of God kept the king from sleeping. And you know, the king had a lot of options. I'm thinking if you're king and you can't sleep, then you can pretty much decree anything to happen that you want. He could have said, you know, bring the court jester in and entertain me with his jokes, or bring me a late night snack, or it could have been anything. And he could have said, I want the royal reader to come in and tell me a story. But he said, I want someone to read from the chronicles of my reign. Now, King Xerxes reigned for 21 years. And you figure the chronicles, those were daily reports of what transpired for the king on a daily basis. There had to be scrolls or volumes of things. And so the reader goes and pulls out the book or the scroll to be read. And he just happens to pick one that's 5 years old, and just happens to pick the portion that talks about Mordecai uncovering the plot to assassinate the king. It's not coincidence. It's not happen chance. God disturbed the king's slumber. God had the right book selected and had the right passage read. Now we also learn that just not coincidence again, Haman just happens to be in the palace at this time. It's in the middle of the night. It's either the middle of the night or very early morning, and Haman is so preoccupied with getting Mordecai killed that he is in the palace as well. He's roaming the halls, just waiting to hear word that the king is up so that he can go to the king and say, I want to have Haman, or I want to have Mordecai killed. Can you imagine the boldness of Haman with this? He is so just fixated on getting Mordecai dead. He can't sleep. He's just all ramped up. He's got this 75-foot pole in his front yard, waiting to see Mordecai impaled on it. And he's thinking, that's the only thing that stands in my way of happiness, is this guy still alive. And so he's wandering around. He wants to go to the king. Can we get Mordecai killed? And so Haman is there. Now look at the last part of verse 5. It says, now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? Remember the king's question. He wants to bring Haman in. He said, what would you do for the man that I would honor? And Haman's thinking to himself, he's talking about me? Have you ever done that? I know I have. You know, there's those times where you've worked hard, you've put in those extra times, you've dug deep, and you're finally, and I'm going to get the recognition I'm due. I'm going to get a pay raise, I'm going to get an award, I'm going to get a plaque, there's going to be some kind of recognition. You know, and sometimes it's those awkward things. Have you been a part of that, where someone says, we've come here, we want to honor somebody, and they go through the whole little spiel about they've done this and they've done that, and we've come, and you're ready to get out of your seat. And you're thinking, man, they're really talking good about me. And so you're ready, and then they mention somebody else's name. And you have to sit back down and go, oh, well, I misread that one. You know, Jesus deals with this in Luke chapter 14. He gives us these words. He says, now, when he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor, for a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. If so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this person your seat. Then humiliated, you will have to take the seat that's least important place. But when you are invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he will say to you, friend, move up to a better place, and then you will be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. We need to just keep self-pride in check. Haman was so certain, so filled with self, so filled with his pride, that how in the world could the king be talking about anybody else other than Haman for someone to receive such an honor? So he could not think possibly that the king was not talking about him. And so the king says, tell us what you would do for such a person that needed honor. And so in verse 7 it starts, he said, Haman answered the king, he said, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head, and then let the robe and the horse be entrusted to one of the king's most notable princes, and let the robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, and proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Haman's got a great picture. He's got it all figured out, don't he? Oh yeah, he knows. He's thinking, this is what I want. And the king gets so caught up, he says, Haman, this is a great idea. He gets all excited about it. And this is what Haman's asking for. He wants the best, the finest things that the king has. Now the proposed robe that he mentions here is not just a single piece of outer garment. It's not like we think of like a cape or an outside garment. The word that's used in Hebrew is the whole wardrobe. He's saying he wants an outfit that the king personally wore himself. He wants his clothes. He also says he wants a crown. But he doesn't just want a crown, he wants a royal crown. The same word is used when Vashti loses her crown and when Esther receives a crown. He wants a royal crown. He wants a horse, a royal horse, not just any horse. He doesn't want an old has-been horse. He wants the horse that the king rides on. He wants to be the king. Even if for a little while, he wants to wear the king's clothes, wears the king's crown, rides on the king's horse, and it's not enough for him to be the king for this short amount of time. He wants this royal dignitary person to walk in front of the procession announcing, here's the person that is most honored and celebrated that the king wants everyone to know. Well, it's quite a thing that he is given. The word that he uses there is the word prince, but it really means a person who is in charge. We see these same phrases in Genesis when it talks about Joseph, and it talks about the chief butler and the chief baker and the captain of the guard. Those are all the same terms of someone who's in charge. And so it says in verse 10, the king says, go at once, the king commanded Haman, get the robe and the horse, and do just as you suggested. Now, you're thinking at this point, Haman is just really excited. He is thinking, this is great. Oh, he's got it all figured out. And then the king says, do all that you suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate, and do not neglect anything you have recommended. Oh my goodness, you talk about whiplash. He went from, this is awesome, to, this is the worst day of my life. He was just devastated. What an amazing turn of events. Both the king and Haman came together that morning with the same person on their mind. The king wanted to honor Mordecai, and Haman wanted to have Mordecai killed. Now, I also like what it says in verse 10. There was no, I don't know exactly who you're talking about. The king says Mordecai the Jew. Now, you could say, well, Mordecai's probably a pretty popular name at this time. Maybe it's some other Jew named Mordecai. But then the king says, the guy who sits by the king's gate. And that was where this particular Mordecai would sit. Haman was devastated. And so not only does Haman have to work all this out for Mordecai, but Haman's the guy that has to be the one pronouncing that this is the guy that the king honors. And so he's the one wandering these dusty streets, giving attention to the person he despises the most. And he doesn't even have time to go home and complain to his family or change clothes. He has to go, and when the parade's over, he runs home and he says to himself, I hope they have some idea, some solution, some way that I can get out of this thing. And so he goes back to his house. Verses 13 and 14 said, his advisors and his wife Zethra said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. When while they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. Now the word fall happens 3 times in verse 13. Now you may not see it, but first off it says his downfall. So it's in there. And the word ruin in Hebrew is actually the word fall. If you fall, you fell. But if you fall, you're ruined. And so his family said, there's nothing you can do. You're in a bad way. Now what's interesting to me is Haman never saw another option. There was never a plan B in this guy's mind. The only thing he had was, I'm number one and I hate Mordecai. And it was just like a broken record playing over and over and over. Never did it occur to him, maybe I should have forgiveness in my heart. Maybe I should repent. Maybe I should go to the king and confess. Maybe I should go to Mordecai and try to become friends. There was never any kind of other thought in Haman's head. Pride can easily get in our way. In a 2005 Fortune magazine, they were doing an article on the best advice I ever received, and they went to Richard Parsons, who was then the chairman of Time Warner. And this was what was written on the article. He said, the best business advice I ever received was from Steve Ross. Steve said to me, Dick, always remember this is a small business and a long life. You're going to see all these guys come around and around again, so how you treat them on each individual transaction is going to make an impression in the long haul. When you do deals, leave a little something to make everyone happy instead of trying to grab every nickel off the table. How many times have you burnt a bridge and you had to face that person again and you went, man, I didn't leave it so well the first time. We need to make sure we keep our pride in check. Thomas Fuller said this. He said, praise makes good men better and bad men worse. Well, once again in chapter 6, we see 2 familiar themes. One is God is always at work. And like I said on the onset, sometimes we question that. Often we miss seeing the activity of God, both in our lives and in the lives of others. It's so much easier for us to assign some non-divine force at work, that it's luck, it's circumstance, it's coincidence, but the reality is God is always at work. Even if you don't see it, even if you don't give him credit and claim for it, God is always at work. I read this story. I don't think it's true, but I think it makes a good point. There was a teacher in school trying to make the case for evolution with her students. And so she picked on Tommy in the class, and she said, Tommy, I want you to go to the window and tell me what you see. Tommy, do you see a tree? Yes, teacher, I see a tree. Tommy, do you see the grass? Yes, teacher, I see the grass. Tommy, can you see the sky? Yes, Tommy, I can see the sky. Well, Tommy, when you were looking at the tree and the grass and the sky, did you see God out there? No, teacher, I didn't see God. Well, that's because, Tommy, there is no God. He doesn't exist. Then the story says that one of the girls in the class said, "Teacher, can I ask Tommy some questions along that line?" And the teacher said, "Sure." And so she said, "Tommy, when you were seeing the grass, did you see the grass? Yeah. Did you see the tree? Yeah." She said, "Tommy, can you see the teacher?" "Yes." "Can you see her brain?" "No." "Well, according to what we learned here today, that's because the teacher don't have a brain." There's a lot of things we don't see, a lot of things we don't understand, but we cannot deny the existence of God. We can see His hand, we can see His imprint everywhere. His existence is often challenged, it's often ridiculed, but you know, it really requires more faith to think that it all just kind of happened somehow, that there was some kind of cosmic accident. I can't imagine how we climbed out of primordial ooze and turned into monkeys, and monkeys turned into people. It's like it's a whole lot easier to believe that God spoke it all into existence. As Christians, we see God not only in the big picture, but in the details of life as well. God catches nothing unaware. He always triumphs, and He always has the best way for us. Now, we could end the message right there, and you might be happy because, you know, we've got really good food waiting on us, and so I'm looking forward to that. I'm sure you are too, but I think there's another point in chapter 6 that we need to look at. And that is, am I a person like Haman? Do I have pride in me? Is there a little bit of Haman in me? You know, the Bible talks 107 times about the word pride or proud. So it's a pretty common theme. I'm going to mention some of the ones we find in Proverbs. Proverbs 29:23 says, "Pride brings a person low, but the lowly in spirit gain honor." Proverbs 11:2 says, "When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom." Proverbs 15:25, "The Lord tears down the house of the proud, but He sets the widow's boundary stones in place." Proverbs 16:5, "The Lord detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished." Now, I don't want you to misunderstand. I think there's some things that we ought to be proud about in our life. We've got accomplishments, we've got degrees, we've got our income, we've got vehicles, we've got a nice home. But sometimes we just take it over the top that we're better than somebody else. That we enjoy more privileges, or our kids are smarter than your kids, or we've got better friends than you've got friends. Sometimes we find that pride takes unusual turns where we're proud about our race, or we're proud about our face. We're proud about our place. But sometimes we're even proud that we've got more of God's grace than you do. And so sometimes our pride is just too much. It's over the top. There are some people that are proud about their humility, which shouldn't make sense. And so we have to be careful not to allow pride to find its way into our life. And so you may sit there and say, okay, well, how do I know if I'm a prideful person? I'm going to ask you some questions. You don't vote and don't point, okay? We're just going to go through these. One, do I have a desire to be admired or noticed by others for something? You know, kind of that Blake Shelton thing in The Voice where he does this. You know, sometimes we just say, me, look at me, see me. Do you have a desire to be recognized or appreciated for what you do? You do something, you look around, who saw me do that? Do you find yourself boasting or taking credit for abilities that really God gave you? Do you struggle with vanity? Are you overly concerned with your appearance, your looks, your clothes? Do you seek the approval of people rather than God? How many times have we wanted the attention our fellow human beings rather than care what God ultimately thinks? Do you have a spirit of unteachableness? I mean, after all, if you already know it all, what is there to learn? Are you unwilling to admit when you're wrong? For those old enough, remember Fonzie, you couldn't say the word wrong. Are you guilty of criticizing others and finding their faults? Do you feel ripped off when you're hurt or overlooked? Are you jealous of other people's success and achievements? Now, if any of those ring home, then the question is, what do I do? If I've got some tendencies for pride in my life, and I think we all kind of have some of that, how do we deal with that? Where do we go? Well, we go to Scripture. I want to turn our attention to 1 Peter chapter 5. And I think in these verses, Peter gives us an outline for how to deal with pride in our lives. Let's see what he says. He says, all of you clothe yourself, wrap yourself around with humility toward one another. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that he may lift you up in due time. It says, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. We need to lean on him. We need to give all of our worries, all of our anxious problems to him. And he tells us to be alert, to be sober-minded. And he says we need to be alert and sober-minded. He says because the devil, our enemy, is always on the prowl. You know, the devil, he doesn't take a day off. He doesn't rest. He doesn't cut you any slack. And it says there that he's like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Now, verse 9 says, resist him. You know, a lot of times we try to resist Satan, and we just try to double up our efforts, don't we? I'm going to knuckle down, I'm going to do better. But look how Peter says, if you're going to resist him, you need to do that by standing firm in the faith. We're not going to resist the devil on our own strength and power. Even Jesus, when he was being tempted by Satan, used the power of God's word to fight his enemy, Satan. So we need to stand firm in our faith because you know that the family of believers throughout the world is undergoing the same kind of sufferings. And the God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, after you have suffered a little while, will himself restore you and make you strong and firm and steadfast. To him be the power forever and ever. Amen. When Peter wrote those words, the church was in a time of deep persecution. They were not just being picked on at work or being made fun of for being Christians. They were being killed, martyred for their faith. And Peter doesn't say, you know, maybe this being a Christian business, maybe we need to just stop. Maybe we should quit. Maybe it's not worth the cost. And he says, no. Now's the time we need to persevere and continue. You know, the book of Esther is so applicable for today. It's not easy or popular to be a Christian. And so we need to figure out how we're going to live our life. And are we going to live our life like Haman and have self and pride and look out for me and I want the world to see how great I am? Or we're going to be like Esther, like Mordecai? Are we going to trust God even in the tough times? Here's my appeal to you as we come to our time of invitation. One, if you're not a born-again Christian, you do not know what you're missing. That, you know, the power, the hope, the strength, the resources, it's just tremendous. Secondly, as Christians, you know, we have good times, we have bad times. We have great moments, we have weak moments. And I just want to encourage you to make a resolve that this week I'm going to resist the devil more by having a stronger faith in him. And then, if you're looking for a church home, maybe you're saying, I'm looking for a place where I can identify, some place that I can be a Christian and have church family, and that's how God created the institution of the church, is for us to be in this together. Then don't move your membership here or join the church. Would you stand as we say?